birds, what do birds have? Their wings. They have wings, so they could actually often represent something angelic, in the positive or the negative. So if you see a bird and it's usually a light color, it could represent positive spiritual beings, righteous spiritual beings. And if they are carrion birds like ravens or vultures, they could represent something demonic, or fallen angelic activity.
Can I just throw a note in there?
Yes.
There's always an exception. Raven. I've never seen vultures represent anything good because they're attracted by death. That's what they do. But ravens are the birds, if they are birds, then, and we take them culturally as such, that fed Elijah. So ravens can often represent a provision of something.
Yeah.
If you see a raven.
Yeah. So I mean, I dream about my budgies, but I don't think they're about angelic. I think often they talk about my spiritual responsibilities in my dream. So if you dream about ravens, obviously they were the ravens the ones that came and got the bread, in the baker's dream.
Yes, that's
yes,
right.
It was ravens.
It's Joseph interprets the dream for the baker. The ravens peck his head.
Yes,
it's a spirit of death.
Spirit of
basically,
death,
it can be a deathly type spirit.
Yeah. The dove often can represent the Holy Spirit.
Or it can represent again the kind of end of a judgment, because the dove is the bird which returns with the olive leaf in its mouth after the flood.
So an owl can also represent wisdom. And it was interesting because we were watching a John Thomas video, and can I just say, if you go onto the Streams Ministry, they have some really interesting things about different dream elements, especially animals. So he's saying he dreamt he was on the back of an owl, and it was the Holy Spirit showing him things that were going to happen in his future, and it was the spirit of wisdom. Often eagles can represent the prophetic. They can represent the prophetic, and they can, because they can get quite high up in the air and they can see far ahead, and they have a very acute eyesight. So, but the eagle can also represent a false god, and often they represented kings, false gods, and the king of Assyria. Was it in Jeremiah or Isaiah that they?
It's Isaiah.
Isaiah, where they speak about the king of Assyria being an eagle, but it was because actually his false deity Nisroch was used to have an eagle head, and it was actually representing that. And sometimes you actually see that. I think it's a lot in Daniel. The thing that the kings worship come as dream symbols, or vision symbols, and those visions that Daniel has of bulls and all sorts of stuff are often the thing that king has been worshipping is the thing that it will represent that king. So yeah, and then hawks are quite interesting because they're easier to train than an eagle. So actually often a hawk can represent a prophetic intercessor. And you had an interesting thing is you can train hawks to land on an arm.
Yeah, a hawk returns to the arm of the trainer, and it's often a very wealthy individual. In Middle Eastern culture, it's often the like the Saudi sheikhs and princes who are very into falconry, and it returns to their right arm, which is a symbol of their governance and the strength of their governance as leaders. And so often it is the prophetic intercessors who return to the leaders and advise them of what's happening and intercede for them. So it's an interesting, very interesting symbol.
So yeah, and then a pigeon is interesting because a pigeon you had a dream about a pigeon once, and it was actually he was carrying a message, wasn't he?
Pigeon, again, a lot of these birds can kind of go both ways. An owl in the positive can be the spirit of wisdom, but it is also a very acute predator, and it does hunt at night. So there's other elements of it, and so it is with a pigeon. I mean, here in the UK, and particularly in London, pigeons are kind of almost like flying rats because they're seen as like disease bearers, which they do that, and they eat everything, So pigeon in that sense is quite negative. And I was going like, what on earth is this pigeon all about in my dream? Because it came and landed on my arm. So I was like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? God, what are you saying? And it was another dream in which I kind of prayed, and I went back into, I brought the dream image back into my mind and spiritually went into it and said, okay, what's happening here? And as I did that, the weirdest thing happened. I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up, but this pigeon that landed on my arm as a normal size hopped off, grew to the size of about a condor, which is probably like a wingspan of about 8 to 10 feet. And then it kind of like, it put its head between my legs, and then it lifted up off the ground and it flew to a certain place. And I really wasn't expecting that. And I was like, it took me days, and I was like, God, what on earth happened? What happened? And then I just felt this, again, quiet voice ask me the question, what do pigeons carry? And of course the answer is a message, because a pigeon is a bird which is trained and used to carry messages. In wartime especially, carrier pigeons carried messages. So it was something about saying that there's going to be a spiritual thing which is going to move you to a different place, and it's carrying you're the message, as a message. I still don't know what that means in reality, but I do know that that is what the dream means.